y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All with Kona, our dog. She enjoys being here. So I have the new Starlink non-actuated, whatever they're calling it, the next gen Starlink setup. I'm going to show you all the pieces of it, and then I'm going to try to replace the current version right here, and that goes up through the wall, across our attic, and all the way over to the peak of our house, and install it, and then we're gonna run some tests and see how they do. So the pieces that I got this box, which was actually the final piece to come in. This is a 45-meter cable. It's very, very long, and that's precisely because the house is, just because of the distance we have to run, it's too long for the standard 15-meter cable. So what is that, about 150 feet, I guess? Something like that. Also, because, unfortunately, the old version of the connector for the roof of our house, or the side of our house, doesn't work. I had to purchase another one of those, so I will be installing that as well. This, actually probably easier to see it this way at this point. Anyway, this goes on the peak of the house right here, and you put the dish on top of that. And then, of course, the star of the show here is the actual dish and new router. So here we have the new dish. It's got like a little kickstand. So if you can put this in your yard or something, this is very simple. You just set it up and it just works. Anyway, but you've got that thing, and it's bigger, but it's also significantly lighter than the old version, at least as far as I remember. I haven't picked up the old version in months because, of course, it's sitting on the roof of our house. But also we have cables, things like that, power supply, and we also have a new router, which, as you can see, is quite different from the old router. Supposedly significantly more powerful, but also a lot smaller because it doesn't have the power supply in it. There is also a power supply in here, which is separate now from the router. It used to be internal to the router, but now it's separate. So we have all of these things are what we're going to be setting up. And actually, what I'm going to do is take this old, the current router, the current main router, is going to turn into a mesh router. So you can reset them, I believe, by plugging in and unplugging it like 7 or 8 times as fast as you can, and it resets it back to factory default. So after all this stuff gets done, I will set that up as a mesh router and then put it in our son's room because he's complaining about the speed and all that stuff. So anyway, as far as current speed, before we change things out, it's somewhere around 150 megabits per second downlink and somewhere around 12 to 15 megabits per second uplink. The ping at across the room, which is where I'm testing it for consistency, so I don't have it right next to the router, is on the order of between 50 and 100 milliseconds, depending on upload, download, variable things. Anyway, I'll put some screen grabs up here so you can check those out. But that's what we have right now, so hopefully we will get somewhat better results by the time we go ahead and switch things out and put in the new generation Starlink. So, unfortunately, we're dealing with, oh, all right, looks like you got something going. All right, can you see the coil? What? Do you see the coil yet?
How's it going, John?
Well, it's been pretty awful so far, but at least we got it up. I got to figure out now which direction to face it. I'm trying to figure that one out, but I think I have to plug it in first, so it's going to be time to plug it in and pull the old cord. Looks bigger. All right, so you can see that the new one is substantially bigger than the old one, and also it hasn't been weather faded yet, so it's much whiter as well, but yeah, substantially larger. Whew, okay, that took 3.5 hours to do. Running things through the roof, snaking them, all that stuff, and I broke the ceiling because, of course, I put my foot in the wrong spot, so that sucks. But Starlink is up and running, so I'm about to do some testing, and we're going to find out if it's faster, the same, whether it was worth all the effort to make the upgrade or not. Alrighty, so back in my office to finish this off. It took about 3.5 hours. It was a pain in the butt. That was entirely because we were trying to fish line up through the wall and everything. I cut my finger very nicely, put my foot through the roof, so there's a crack in the ceiling now, so we have to deal with that stuff. So, anyway, aside from those problems, everything went reasonably well. The new install was good. The non-actuated disc, you actually have to, and so I was up on the roof, of course, and I had to put in all the stuff, but you have to move it around manually. So there's like like a thing that you put it into instead of the kickstand. It's like a little tube, and there's like a compression bolt basically that holds it together, so you can spin it and then you tighten that bolt and it holds it in place. So basically the problem was it was so far away that it couldn't reach from the Wi-Fi of the router. So I had to have my wife stand in misinformation, had to stand in the driveway, and she had to yell at me like, turn it a little more clockwise, a little more counterclockwise. So anyway, but it only took a couple of minutes and we got it pretty well set up. So the big question, of course, is, drumroll please, what are the speeds? So this morning starting at 8:12, and this is a little bit of an unfair comparison because of course this morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, minimal usage. So we're going to get slightly better statistics than we are later in the day. So, you know, whatever. Anyway, I'm just warning you about that because the results are not quite as outstanding as you might think they are. Anyway, first thing in the morning, this was before changing out everything. It was 187 megabits per second down and 15.5 up with an unloaded ping of 92, a download ping of 85, and an upload ping of 40, which was not so bad. After switching this over this afternoon at 1:39 p.m., so of course much more crowded, many more people probably using Starlink at that time of day than they would be first thing in the morning. Anyway, download was 157 and a half. Upload, interestingly enough, was 21, almost 20.8, and then the pings were 41, 64, and 56. So you can see that the download speed and everything was not as good as the download speed first thing in the morning, but I chalk a lot of that up to the traffic going on. But the upload speed was 5 megabits per second faster, which is a really, really nice thing. And then I went downstairs to my office here where I am right now, which has a mesh router attached to it. I did have to restart the mesh router, which by the way is just unplug it and plug it in as fast as you can, like 7 or 8 times, and then it factory resets, and then you pair it as a new mesh router. But look at these results. This is really interesting. 172 down, which is very, very good, but the upload speed was 29 megabits per second. So that's basically about twice as fast as I was getting this morning on the old version. Now, for many of you that may not matter. For me, that is crucial. If I can upload twice as fast, I'm going from an hour to upload a long video, a YouTube or X video, to half an hour. So that makes a really, really big difference to me. And then of course you can see the ping was 181 unloaded, but 81 and 35. So pretty reasonable. My son probably is not going to be particularly thrilled with these numbers still because he's a gamer and all he cares about is like 10 millisecond ping, but you're just not going to get that out of a satellite. And the big problem really honestly is that it's variable. You can see that the ping is pretty good sometimes and it gets worse and then it gets better and then it gets worse. So it's one of those interesting issues. But of course the old version of Starlink, the actuated one that we had, worked fantastic for doing things like Zoom conferences and, you know, communication, all that kind of stuff. The one thing it's not particularly good at is gaming. I don't think this is going to get much better, but I'm going to take the old primary router that we had, that was the one that was connected to the dish, and I'm going to factory reset that and set that up as a node and put it in my son's room, which will hopefully reduce the ping and the variability of the ping a little bit as well. So anyway, hopefully he'll be happy with that. The last thing I want to do is look at the advanced speed test. The other ones that I've shown you are from speedtest.net, which I prefer because I can run it on everything. But Starlink has its own advanced speed test, and it has from the internet, from the satellite to your router, and then it has from your router to your object, your phone or whatever. And so there's actually 2 speed tests in one for that. So anyway, first thing in the morning at 8:15 in the morning, you could see we had 140 megabits per second download from the internet to our router and 15.2 megabits per second up. And then the router to my phone was 239 megabits down and 221 up. And if we then turn to the new dish and router, you can see that the advanced speed test, the router to internet of 128 and 13.6 is actually less than it was this morning. Again, a lot of network traffic and stuff like that, but you can see that the router back and forth with my phone was substantially faster. It was 518 megabits per second down and 406 up. So again, I'm going to chalk some of the upload and download to the internet to the fact that it's just a busier time right now, and they're just the variability of different satellites, things like that. So anyway, but it's more or less the same. Again, with the 2 speed tests that I ran upstairs and downstairs with Ookla, with their speedtest.net, I got significantly higher upload speeds, which made me very happy. But the advanced speed test showed that it was a little bit different. But again, it could just be if I run it again in 5 more minutes, it will be better. And if I run it 5 more minutes after that, it'll be a little bit worse. If you ever run it with any kind of internet, unless you have like direct fiber to a T3 line or something like that, you're going to find that that kind of happens over time anyway. There's a lot of variability in your connection. You just usually don't notice it because you're not maxing out your bandwidth. So what are my thoughts about all of this? It was a pretty good sized pain in the butt to do all of this stuff. So if you have an original actuated version of the Starlink dish, the original router, all of that kind of stuff, and everything is working well for you, I wouldn't go to the trouble of purchasing it because it does cost a lot of money as well. So I wouldn't go to the trouble of purchasing it it and then, the annoyance of putting it all in. If you're purchasing a new Starlink, obviously you should get this version rather than the old. I'm not sure exactly where they are in terms of building things right now, but if you only have access to the actuated one, I would put it off a month or two until you can get one of the new non-actuated, kickstand ones, because clearly it is better. The router and the Wi-Fi and everything is substantially better, and from what I can see, the upload speeds are significantly better with the new dish as well. So it's definitely worth waiting for the new version of the dish if you haven't bought one right now. If you have the old version, I would say, unless you're seeing problems with it, it's not quite adequate for your situation. If that's the situation, then of course upgrade. But if things are working pretty well, it was a pain to install, it was expensive, all of that stuff, I really don't see the point of upgrading to this version of it if everything else is working as well. For me, I think it's going to be a big advantage because I'm going to get better upload speeds. And of course, I will check back in on this after a couple of weeks of using this for Zoom calls and other types of things and let you know what I think about it once I've torture tested it a little bit more. But at present, I think it was a good decision for me, aside from putting my foot through the ceiling. That's the one bad decision of the day, and I'm going to have to go and fix that, and that's going to be a giant pain in the rear. But aside from that, the rest of it went reasonably well. It did take some time to get that set up, but mostly that was because I was trying to fish wire through the ceiling and all of that kind of stuff, which is a giant pain in the rear. So if you have a more convenient setup where it doesn't take as much time, then the time aspect won't be that big of a deal. It would mostly be the expense aspect for you. But for me, again, I think this is going to be a pleasant upgrade for me, and I will definitely notice it. But for most people, I don't think you would necessarily notice it. So that is my 2 cents about that. I think it's a really nice upgrade. I think it's a much more elegant dish. It's flatter, it's lighter, it's substantially larger, and it gets about 110-degree field of view that it can see, as opposed to the old one, which I believe was around 90, something like that. So it gets a substantially larger field of view to see more satellites. So overall, I think it's a definite upgrade, but it's also not one of those things that's such a big step change that if you already have one that you need it. Before I go, a quick addendum here with 3 new bits of information. First of all, the new Starlink dish and router now use RJ45 connectors or Ethernet connectors. They are much smaller. They're just the standard kind of Ethernet connector, although they are weatherproofed, and it makes it much easier to feed them through walls and things like that than the old one, which had a 90-degree angle in it, which was a really big pain in the butt to pull through walls. And speaking of weatherproofness, the dish, the router, and the power supply for the router are all IP67 weatherproofed, which means they are completely dustproof and also can sit in shallow water for up to 30 minutes. So basically you can put all of this stuff outdoors. Of course, our dish is outdoors and our router is indoors, but if you want to do something where you have it in a weather exposed cabin or something like that, you can certainly do that with all of this equipment. And then third of all, if you do upgrade your older Starlink dish and router setup to the new setup, be sure you go into the Starlink app and cancel the old one, or else you'll get double billed, which I'm sure would not make you very happy. So in order to do that, make sure you name the new one something like new until the old one is disconnected. Go in, find the old setup, click cancel service and all of that stuff, answer a couple of questions. I said that I was replacing it with newer hardware. I didn't want to return the hardware because I'm going to give it to my in-laws, but you can actually return the hardware if you want to, which would be nice. They will probably donate it to somebody else that is in need if you do that and you don't need the old hardware anymore. But when you do cancel the service, it will only end at the end of the month when you're doing that. So ours actually conveniently expires on January 5th and it's December 31st. So we have 5 days of simultaneous connection, and then the old one will drop off and we'll only have the single account after that. Anyway, I hope this extra information is helpful. And then the final question is, what am I going to do with the old actuated version? I'm going to give it to Misinformation's parents because they live outside of town in South Georgia. So I already checked. They definitely are approved for having Starlink there. They're going to have to purchase a primary router because I'm going to turn the one that we have here into a mesh router for our son. But that's like $150 as opposed to the outlay of the entire Starlink thing. So I think they will actually be fairly happy with that situation. So anyway, that was installation and my review of the new Starlink kickstand version. What do you think about that? Do you have a new Starlink? Do you have the old one? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. While you're down there, please do like the video so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have Tesla bot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, while I'm not a Starlink affiliate, I am a Tesla and Amazon affiliate. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.